Not to a single secret group, not to one powerful family, and not always to other countries. Here's the real mystery. If almost everyone is in debt, then who is actually winning? Who is on the other side of the ledger? This question challenges everything we assume about money, governments, and power. And once you follow the trail long enough, you'll realize this story is not just about finance. It's about how the modern world is built, why crises keep happening, and why the same problems return again and again, just under different names. Let's begin with a shocking number. The world today is more than $300 trillion in debt. That is several times larger than the total value of everything humans produce in an entire year. Governments are deep in debt. Corporations are loaded with debt. Households, students, and workers are drowning in debt. Even the richest nations on earth are borrowing more every year. So the obvious question is unavoidable. Where is all this money coming from? To understand that, we need to go back before modern banks, before credit cards, before national currencies as we know them. Debt did not begin as something sinister. Thousands of years ago, debt was simple and personal. Someone borrowed grain, tools, or silver and paid it back later. Money was a convenience, not a weapon. But everything changed when money itself began to transform. In the 17th and 18th centuries, governments faced a problem. Wars were becoming larger and more expensive. Empires needed roads, ships, and armies. Taxes alone were not enough, so governments began borrowing large sums of money from wealthy financiers. In exchange, those financiers were given something incredibly powerful, the right to create money and lend it at interest. One of the most important moments came in 1694 with the creation of the Bank of England. This wasn't just a bank, it was a new model. The government borrowed money from a private institution, paid interest on it, and allowed that institution to issue currency. That idea spread across Europe, eventually the world. This is the crucial shift most people never learn in school. Modern money is created through debt. When a government, company, or individual borrows money, new money is created. But when that loan must be repaid, interest is also owed. And here's the problem hidden in plain sight. The interest is never created with the loan. That means there is always more debt than money available to repay it. This wasn't obvious at first. In fact, it seemed to work beautifully. Fast forward to the 20th century. 2 world wars left much of the planet destroyed. Countries needed rebuilding fast. Factories, homes, roads, and entire cities had to be reconstructed. Borrowing appeared to be the only solution. This led to the creation of global financial institutions like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. Their missions sounded noble: stabilize economies, prevent collapse, and help developing nations grow. And at first, borrowing did exactly that. Countries rebuilt, trade expanded, living standards improved. But the cause and effect chain was already set in motion. Countries borrowed money. Loans came with interest and conditions. Interest accumulated over time. Old loans required new loans to be repaid. Debt slowly stopped being temporary. It became permanent. Developing nations were hit especially hard. Many borrowed money to fund education, healthcare, and infrastructure. But instead of growing out of debt, they found themselves spending more and more of their national budget just paying interest. In some cases, they paid back far more than they originally borrowed and still owed money. So again, the question rises to the surface: who is receiving all these interest payments? The answer is uncomfortable because it's not simple. Governments owe money to domestic banks. They owe money to central banks. They owe money to pension funds, insurance companies, and investment firms. Sometimes they even owe money to their own citizens through government bonds. This is where the illusion forms. It seems like everyone owes everyone else, so maybe it all balances out. But it doesn't, because the system itself requires endless expansion. More loans must always be created to pay off old ones. When growth slows, the system begins to crack.
And history shows us what happens next. In the Great Depression, credit collapsed and economies imploded. In the late 19th century, entire regions fell into debt crises. In 2008, the global financial system nearly collapsed under the weight of reckless lending. Each time, the pattern was the same. Debt grows faster than real economic value. Confidence breaks. Payments fail. Institutions face collapse. Governments step in. And when governments step in, they don't use their own money. They use public money. Banks were rescued with trillions of dollars in 2008, not because they were innocent, but because the system depended on them. If they fell, everything fell. And after the rescue, one thing became clear. The debt never disappeared. It was simply transferred. The burden moved from private institutions to governments, and when governments struggle, the burden moves again to ordinary people. This is where the fallout becomes visible. Higher taxes, cuts to public services, delayed development, and most importantly, inflation. Inflation is one of the quietest ways debt reshapes society. When more money is created to keep the system running, the value of money falls. Prices rise, savings lose purchasing power, wages struggle to keep up. Meanwhile, debts, especially government debts, become easier to repay with cheaper money. In other words, the system survives by slowly shifting the cost downward. Leaders have tried many solutions over the years: austerity measures, debt restructuring, bailouts, money printing, near-zero interest rates. Each solution buys time. None solve the core issue. Austerity reduces spending but hurts growth. Money printing fuels inflation. Bailouts protect institutions but reward risk-taking. The underlying structure remains unchanged. Money is still born as debt. And today, the warning signs are everywhere. Governments are running record deficits. Interest payments are becoming one of the largest items in national budgets. Some countries now borrow simply to pay interest on old loans. Younger generations inherit obligations they never agreed to. History isn't repeating exactly, but it's rhyming. So, after all this, we return to the original question. The world is in trillions of dollars in debt, but to whom? The most honest answer is this: the world is in debt to a system where money equals debt, a system where growth depends on borrowing, a system where stability requires constant expansion, and when expansion slows, crisis follows. This doesn't mean debt is always evil. Debt can build hospitals, fund innovation, and lift millions out of poverty. But when debt becomes endless, when it becomes the foundation rather than the tool, it turns into a trap. There are three truths worth remembering. First, global debt is not an accident. It is built into the design of modern money. Second, financial crises are not rare failures. They are recurring outcomes of the system itself. Third, the real cost of global debt is paid quietly over time by ordinary people through inflation, reduced services, and lost opportunities. The real question is not whether the system will change. The question is whether it will change by careful reform or by another massive collapse. If this story made you see the world differently, support the video so more people can find it. Subscribe for more deep explorations into the systems shaping our lives, and leave a comment with your thoughts, because understanding how the system works is the first step towards deciding whether we want to keep it this way.